a trek in Nepal, a climb out of the comfort zone. I often say, particularly given my part in the Dakar rally, that it's very important for top managers to step outside their comfort zone now and then. A trek in Nepal is ideal for that. You're guaranteed to leave the zone, and without the risk of losing a leg, which very nearly happened to me with Dakar.
We would like to inform you that this voice recording was created by artificial intelligence.
The Manaslu circuit trek. That was the plan. 7 days of constant uphill, day 8 crossing the Larkya La Pass, then 2 days down. It's the fastest route with no acclimatization days. Nobody told us in advance. It's 7 in the morning. We're waking up in a grim little hotel in Machachola, 800 meters above sea level, after a night when our room had one small window onto the corridor, where an Italian spent half the night professing love to his girlfriend, presumably sensing there'd be no signal further on. Rain hammers relentlessly on the tin roof. Half an hour later, we've downed our garlic soup, apparently great for altitude sickness, pulled on our mountain gear, and set off on the roughly 160 kilometers, at the end of which, just before the finish, the Larkya Pass, 5,106 meters above sea level, should be waiting. A pass we must cross, having no plan B. That is no time to descend the way we came up. On day 1, we'd planned roughly 22 kilometers to Jagat, 1,300 meters above sea level, and only about 600 meters of elevation gain. The route plan forgot to mention the path also goes downhill, often in fact, so the daily elevation total is usually well over 1,500 meters. But fair enough, after 2 hours the rain stopped, by lunch we were dry, and we reached Jagat in good spirits, a well-oiled team. Perhaps it's time to introduce the team. My wife and I both essentially cargo hauled over the Larkya La Pass. Ramesh Adhikari, an IT man and owner of a Nepali travel agency, who decided to set himself a challenge and do the trek with us, since he owns the agency anyway. Lal Bahadur Gurung, a professional high-altitude guide, also a qualified pharmacist and holder of a silver medal from a Nepali dance competition. More on that later. And 2 porters, young lads who hauled our bags for $25 a day, a luxury we happily indulged in, and a good call. Unlike us, Ramesh had no porter. Instead, he packed 22 short-sleeved t-shirts to avoid wearing wet, smelly ones. He suffered the weight on day 1, then each morning shifted roughly a third of his pack into our porter's bags to lighten his load. The first 4 days were essentially the same. Breakfast at 7, uphill before 8. Lunch en route, roughly the same, kilometers and elevation gain daily. The route ran through a deep valley with steep gorges, a river below and many suspension bridges. The weather was fairly kind, bar the start. Only on day 4's afternoon did the sky close in, and instead of rain it began to snow. We strapped on crampons at once. The slope was slippery and nobody fancied a 300-meter drop. We reached the village of Low, 3,150 meters above sea level, in a fierce blizzard. Overnight, another 30 centimeters of snow fell. At breakfast next morning, the Germans, who'd walked with us the day before, called it quits and headed down. I asked Lal what he thought. The affable pharmacist didn't hesitate. He echoed my favorite line, "Don't worry, you're going to love it." He used my own medicine on me. Then he pointed into the clouds. "That's Manaslu summit. If it isn't visible from Samagaon, the next village, I'll show it to you on my phone." And he shooed us into the wet snow. On the way to Samagaon, we passed more groups turning back. Then the snow stopped, and as always in the mountains, morale shot up 100% in an instant. In Samagaon, 3,550 meters above sea level, we needed no phone to see the summit of Manaslu, the world's 8th highest mountain at 8,163 meters above sea level. It rose just above us, close enough to touch. The forecast for the next 3 days, deep blue sky. The last outpost of civilization is Samdo, 3,850 meters above sea level, Nepal's highest permanently inhabited settlement. On the Manaslu circuit, higher seems to mean better accommodation. The little hotel was magnificent. Translated, it had a view, the room was a pleasant -5, and the loo was a squat one in the corridor. But it had a splendid dining room and superb grub. True everywhere on the route, everyone copies everyone else's menu. In Samdo, we felt the altitude and a drop in performance. Here Lal let slip that people usually do this stretch more slowly, with an acclimatization rest day, but the Sandberg capital guys who'd gifted us Nepal told him we could handle it, so he hadn't agonized over the itinerary. In hindsight, they were right. 2 stages remained to the pass. We reached Dharamsala, 4,450 meters above sea level, a high-altitude bunkhouse, relatively early, around 2. We were assigned a cabin with a 4-person mattress platform, went for a short acclimatization walk, and turned in after 7 with the alarm set for the splendid hour of 3:30. Not that there was much else to do. Nobody had lit the dining room stove, and rooms had to be ventilated for enough oxygen. D-Day began eventfully. Ramesh, without noticing, had thrown Lal's crampons into his rucksack with everything else. We only worked this out that evening. Lal, who had us all on his shoulders, spent a while hunting for a spare pair, and when that failed, tied rope around his boots, reckoning he'd probably manage. Off we went, all except my wife, who after about 10 meters found she couldn't walk at that altitude. After a brief panic, she remembered she hadn't used her airway opening spray. She fixed that, and all was fine again. Around 5:30 it began to grow light, and the full Himalayan splendor revealed itself around us. Out of the pitch-black dark emerged the gilded summits of Manaslu, the Annapurnas and other peaks nearby. We were puffing like steam engines. Not that we'd never been at a similar altitude before, but I have the feeling our 62 years make oxygenating the body harder work than it used to be. About 2 kilometers below the pass we passed an Israeli woman with her porter. She was utterly exhausted, stumbling and barely able to go on. We got some glucose into her, which helped a little, and since visibility was good, we let her continue with her porter. A kilometer before the pass, a huge powder snow avalanche swept off Larkya Peak, after which the pass is named, nature's gentle reminder of who's really in charge here. Then we were at the Larkya Pass, 5,106 meters above sea level. 20 minutes of joy, photos with the prayer flags, gasping with every step. Then the descent. First 600 vertical meters down a glacier's edge. The path was treacherously slippery, and Lal, without crampons, nearly took a tumble some 30 times, but we made it below the glacier unscathed, and a few hours later were down another 1.5 kilometers in Bimthang, 3,600 meters above sea level, where the snow finally ended. The next day brought another 1,100-meter descent to the hamlet of Go, 2,500 meters above sea level. We had an after-party planned there with the porters, not knowing we would also be celebrating Nepali New Year. As I mentioned earlier, Lal came second in the national dance competition. He was extraordinary. Dancing is genuinely in his blood. In the end, we all danced, including me, for the first time in 15 years, I think. Nobody minded aching calves from the descent. The next day brought only a short descent to Darapani, 1,800 meters above sea level, and a battered dirt track leading back to civilization, then an interminable jeep ride to Chitwan National Park, 100 meters above sea level, for rhino watching, but that's a story for another time. The trip was a 60th birthday gift from Sandberg capital. Thanks to Michal Ribovich and Martin Fedor, it's one of the finest gifts I've ever received. Thank you.